I'm just going to give everybody a heads up that all attendees are on listen-only mode. I'm going to have put a couple slides up here so we can pause in the middle of the webinar presentation. And if you have a question, just click the question button, and Evan Andres, who's our moderator, is going to take you off of mute and allow you to ask that question. Evan, is that basically right?
Yes, that is correct, Christina.
All right, wonderful. Where is that question button? Can you just inform people on the webinar where they can find that question button?
Yeah, folks, it's hi, I'm Evan Andrews. I'm just helping out with some tech issues, and that question box, you can type in your questions there, and we will we'll just sort of sift through them. And when Christina takes a pause, I'll serve as the sort of proctor of the questions. So you should see that question panel. It's in your little control box there. Just don't be afraid to use it. I can see questions in real time, and that's how we'll do it. Okay?
Wonderful. Evan, thank you for your help. Evan is a part of the Energy Center here at PennFuture. So and he's our specialist on solar and many other issues as well, and we're happy to have him on the presentation today. The goals of today's presentation are basically to become a little bit more familiar with PennSave and the resources we're providing, understanding the basic structure of what an energy savings performance contract is, become familiar with the 5 basic steps of a performance contract, learn a little bit about some of the challenges and opportunities, and begin to be able to identify if performance contracting is going to be a good fit for your facility. So some of the basics here. What is PennSave? Well, PennSave is a coalition effort between PennFuture, which is a 501c3 environmental advocacy organization, the Pennsylvania chapter of the Energy Services Coalition, which is another 501c3 made up of employees from different energy service companies. Their mission is to provide education on performance contracting. And then the Pennsylvania Energy Partnership, which is an initiative of participating local development districts around Pennsylvania. And the Pennsylvania Energy Partnership provides technical services and different education and outreach on energy efficiency specifically, and also ESCO contracting, or as we're calling it, energy savings performance contracting. But if you may hear ESCO, you may hear performance contracting or ESPCs, it's all basically the same term. So PennSave aims to develop a statewide education and outreach program on energy savings performance contracting. It's a relatively new partnership coalition effort, began at the beginning of 2013, so we're still ramping up, but we made a lot of progress. We're developing sample procurement documents and easy-to-understand materials that focus on consumer education and protection in order to promote some high-quality performance contracting in Pennsylvania. Why is PennSave needed now? Well, the Pennsylvania Department of General Services, or DGS, formerly used to have an energy management office. This office developed a pre-qualified list of ESCO contractors for school districts, municipalities, and the state government to choose from when entering into these performance contracts. And that Energy Management Office also provided outreach, marketing, and technical assistance to school districts and municipalities, also the state government, in order to kind of facilitate performance contracting. Well, in 2011, that office was eliminated, and the DGS, basically Energy Management Office, a system for these performance contracts, the procurement documents and whatnot, they were all kind of put on hold. So that resource no longer exists. In addition, performance contracts have been around for a very long time, but they're still poorly understood by potential users, and that's pretty much because of the complex nature of these contracts. In addition, state funding cuts have made performance contracting more attractive because of things like PlanCon and Act 1 and just general budget cuts. I think school districts and municipalities are looking for different financing solutions for how to upgrade their facilities, making performance contracting more attractive and enhancing the need to have something like PennSave in place. So when you're talking about performance contracting in Pennsylvania, an important thing to understand is the Pennsylvania Guaranteed Energy Savings Act. This Pennsylvania law allows government units like school districts and municipalities to enter into long-term contracts of terms for between 5 and 20 years with energy service companies, or ESCOs, for energy-saving facility projects. These projects are financed basically through the energy savings achieved through the upgrades. And even though the Pennsylvania Department of General Services no longer has an office dedicated to facilitating these contracts, these government units can still enter into the performance contracts. So the authority to enter into these contracts has not been impacted. It's just really that government office that facilitated the contracts, which just doesn't exist anymore. So why would you want to enter into a performance contract? Well, maybe your facility needs energy-related improvements, like you have an old HVAC system or old boilers, or you need to update your lighting. But maybe, and this is maybe a lesser-known part of performance contracts, maybe there's other capital needs that require attention, like a new roof, maybe asbestos removal, maybe you need paving of driveways and such. So performance contracts can handle those energy-related and those non-energy capital improvements as well. Another reason you may be interested is because your facility maybe has these needs but doesn't have the upfront capital to pay for the improvements, and maybe your municipality or school district cannot issue its own new debt. So you're looking for innovative ways to finance these improvements. Maybe also you want the added security of a guarantee that you'll be able to cover the cost of the project. And that's a very important part of a performance contract, this guarantee that the savings, the energy savings that you'll achieve in the project will be able to cover the cost of that project. And this is basically how that mechanism works. And I'm just going to pull over a little spotlight here. So the basic principle is that the energy savings facility upgrades, like the HVAC replacement, say for example, reduce projected energy and maintenance costs, freeing up capital to pay off debt and reduce overall facility costs. So here we have your existing facility, and here are your energy use costs and your maintenance cost. Now, post-performance contract upgrade, and this is one option, you can see your energy costs will be lowered, your maintenance costs will be lowered, and then your overall bill will be the same because a portion of your savings will be used to repay the debt. Now there's another option, say if you want to actually have some net savings or bill reduction as a part of your project. The project can be structured so that you'll still have some energy savings, you'll still have reduced maintenance cost, you'll still be able to repay your debt, and overall your bill will go down. At the end of the project, what you'll see is your bill will go down a lot more. The end of the project, meaning when the project, you're finished repaying the debt, at the end you'll see, again, your energy savings, or your energy use has gone down, your maintenance costs are lower, and then you capture, as the customer, that full energy savings, and you're no longer paying debt down. So it's just a something to understand about how basically this works. So it's really this portion right here, this orange portion, which allows you to pay down that debt. So what are some of the energy conservation measures that help you reduce your utility costs and help finance the energy and capital related improvements? Well, there's short-term payback options and longer-term payback options. And you just want to make sure you understand that the different activities you enter into, they have different payback periods and create different types of opportunities for financing. So some of the shorter payback options would be lighting, retrofits and controls, heating recovery systems, motor efficiency, HVAC controls. Some of the longer term payback are the higher cost replacements like boilers, chillers, windows and doors, insulation, roofing replacement. So the basic question then becomes, well, okay, so we're starting to understand why we may want this and a little bit of the basics of how it works, but what is a performance contract? Well, the number one thing that you need to understand about performance contracts are they are not magic. These are not, found money. These are business transactions. They've been successfully used by decades by the federal, state, and local governments, and they do work. However, the details matter. So a performance contract is a contract for full project services where the customer contracts with the ESCO for energy-related services, and the ESCO guarantees that the energy savings needed to cover the debt will be achieved. The customer also contracts with a lender for upfront capital in most, if not all, instances. These contracts, these contractual agreements, have opportunities and risks for all parties. So the customer has to understand that they're getting a benefit, but there's also a risk. But that's the same for the energy savings company. There's risk to all parties, including the lender. And let's go over those risks right now. So here we have, here again we have a contract. Here's our contract. This contract, we have three parties: the lender, which could be a bank, the energy savings company, the service provider, and the facility or the customer. Now, in some cases, the lender here, maybe a municipality might want to self-finance, but in most cases, that's not happening. It can, but for sake of argument, this is the general way these contracts work. There's three parties. Now, each party has opportunities and risks. For the facility or the customer, the opportunity is that you get these energy and capital upgrades for the facility. You get a guarantee that the energy savings will be achieved, and they'll be in an amount enough to repay your debt, and you have access to some top experts in the field. The risk for the customer is that the customer fails to follow the contract provisions and therefore can void the energy guarantee. Again, the energy guarantee is a very important part of these contracts, so the customer has to understand their responsibilities in the contract and stick to them. There is a complicated contract process in developing performance contracts, and that is also a risk because of the complexity. Maybe some customers don't understand their responsibilities. Also, because these contracts are long-term, sometimes it can make tracking issues difficult. Now, again, all parties must perform. Now let's go to the next slide where we see what the opportunities and risks are for the energy service company. The opportunity for the energy service company is that they can generate revenues and profits based on their core competencies, using their expertise as an energy service company to basically make money. It's part of their business model. They can also, if they do a good job, generate new business through recommendations, so it's in their interest to do a good job. The risks for the energy service companies is that the performance contracts have a very long and expensive sales cycle, and because of municipal procurement, you're always competing against other people. So an ESCO could spend a lot of money on a proposal and not win, and that's a risk that they take on. Also, they risk that the equipment or the system that they designed and installed is underperforming, and if it underperforms and doesn't achieve those energy savings, as long as the customer did everything that the customer was supposed to do on their side of the contract, then the ESCO is on the hook to guarantee to the customer that they will achieve that level of energy savings. So they will actually have to pay out of their pocket to the customer to make sure the customer can pay back their debt. Now, for the lender also has opportunities and risks. The opportunity for the lender is that they get a reasonable rate of return for the capital that they lent out, and that it's a pretty low risk investment for the lender because of the financial guarantee that the energy service company provides, and they feel like this is going to be a pretty low risk investment for themselves. However, they have to make sure that their projections ensure profitability, and there's always the risk that the customer can refinance the project with another provider, and that changes the profit profile for the lender. So the bottom line is all parties have to perform. There is risk and opportunities for everybody that is a party to this contract, and you have to understand what your responsibilities are. So at this point, I'm going to do a quick pause for questions, and the next thing we're going to talk about is the performance contracting process.
Christina, we only have one question.
Evan, are there any questions at this point?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, good. You can hear me. Okay. One question, does the 5 to 20-year term that you mentioned, and I imagine that this is the contract term, does it include the construction period?
And this is Marilyn, if she's on the line, she could
and she
type
is.
in
She
if
is.
I'm
I can
not
activate
getting this
her.
right.
Yeah, I can activate her now too. But go ahead.
Yeah, my understanding is that does include the contract term. The repayment would really be the 5 to 20-year period, and the repayment typically doesn't start until a few months after the project has been completed and energy savings are accrued. But yes, that would be part of the term. And Marilyn, correct me if I'm wrong.
Marilyn, this is probably. Oh,
actually,
good. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
The construction period is not part of the repayment period.
But it is part of that 15 to 20-year contract agreement.
Yes.
Right.
That construction time, which can be up to a year, you are getting savings because they normally will do your lighting first and your savings start to accrue right away. Your first payment, though, does not start until construction is completed. So you would have that first year in there, but you wouldn't have to pay your first payment until after that construction period is done.
Great. And just for everybody's information, Marilyn Gull is a consultant to the PennSave process. She's also on
Christina, we're having some audio problems with you. Just
Mrs. Co.
Oh, okay, good. They seem to have worked themselves out. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. There was a pause there.
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead and
okay,
introduce Marilyn again. I think the audio.
All right, I was just telling. Oh, okay. Great. I just wanted to introduce Marilyn Bagal. She's a consultant to the PennSave initiative. She's also a part of the leadership team at the Energy Services Coalition and is a former employee of the Energy Management Office at the Department of General Services. And we thank Marilyn for making time to be on the line today to answer any questions that I won't be able to, which will probably be several. So thank you, Marilyn. Any other questions?
Christina, we don't have any other questions in the panel right now. So
all right. Thank you very much. I'll move on to the next slide, which is what is the energy savings performance contracting process. So there's 5 basic steps. The first is to evaluate if performance contracting is the right choice for your facility. Then to select a service provider. Third, contract for services. Fourth, construct the project. And fifth, verify savings. So this first step, evaluate if energy savings performance contracting is right for you. The goal of this step is to understand if your facility has the technical and decision-making components needed to deliver a successful project. Some milestones of this process include gathering the energy use data and other technical information about the facility that you need, and then determining if you have an internal decision-making structure that's needed for performance contracting to work. The reason why the internal decision-making structure is so important is because the process of performance contracting has many different steps, both on the procurement side and then and mostly on the procurement side, leading up to when you actually endorse a contract. And you have to make sure that you have a team that has all the authority needed, that is bought in and interested in the process, so that this procurement, all the steps leading up to the actual procurement, go smoothly and that there aren't major delays and questions. So it really highlights the importance of putting a good team together and making sure the team is educated. And that's where we believe that the PennSave resources can help. Now, as you saw in the beginning of the slide, this is a PennSave 101 presentation. We've developed our educational materials in a 101, 201, and 301 kind of tiered level of education. So 101 is meant to be a very simplistic overview of issues and that is mostly developed into one-page documents and very simplistic webinars like the one today. 201 will be more detailed documents and in-person workshops where we'll dive much deeper into these issues. And then the 301 documents are meant to be actual guides towards in the procurement process. So it's a little bit of information about the PennSave resources, all which are on PennSave.org, which I'll go over briefly at the end of the presentation. But we have good candidate forms, 101, 201, and 301 forms. The 101 is going to be given at the end of this presentation, and it just gives you information about how to determine whether, how to develop or gather your data and develop if you're a good candidate. We have information on about facilitators. We're also developing resources to identify free or low-cost data collection sources that you may be able to access, and also recommendations on how to develop a decision-making structure and what kind of skills are needed for the people that would be on that decision-making panel. Some of these things have already been developed and some of them are pending. The second step is selecting a service provider. The goal here is to identify qualified energy service companies interested in bidding on your project. A very important note here for the customer is that at this point, no financial commitment is made by the customer until step 3. Because right now you're still selecting, you're still determining, you haven't entered into a contract. However, you must understand that the ESCOs incur a lot of cost to respond to proposals, to requests for proposals and requests for qualifications. So you should be serious about considering performance contracting before moving into this step, just with the understanding that the ESCOs are spending a lot of money to respond to your proposal. So some of the milestones here you want to understand is you want to develop an internal decision-making team. You want to identify qualified ESCOs via a request for qualification, which is a rather simplistic document that talks about qualifications and can talk about cost, can talk about experience, etc. Then you want to make sure you secure decision-maker approval to issue a request for proposal, and you issue that request for proposal to ESCOs that you've determined to be qualified through the RFQ process. So again, first step, you determine who's qualified. Second step, you make sure, first step is the internal decision-making team. Second, determine what ESCOs are qualified to bid on your work. Third step, making sure the decision makers are on board for you issuing an RFQ, and then you issue the RFQ to the qualified ESCOs. We have some resources on the PennSave.org website, including some sample RFQs and RFPs with scoring criteria. These documents are pending, but they're in the development stages. We have some guidance that's being developed on the, as I mentioned before, the skills, who should be on your decision-making team. And we also have distribution lists and an online opportunity center for customers and ESCOs so that RFQ and RFP opportunities can be advertised. So if you're a customer and you want to advertise your opportunity through PennSave, you contact us through info@pennsave.org. We will then post your opportunity to our website and send out the opportunity to our list of ESCOs. Step 3 is contracting for services. So here you want to execute various contracts for performance contracting services with a qualified ESCO that delivers the best value to you. So a note here is by entering into an investment grade audit, which is the first milestone in this process, the customer is making its first financial commitment. And you want to understand that the cost of this investment grade audit can be incorporated into the overall performance contract if a performance contract is signed. If it is not signed, the customer is going to be responsible for the cost of that investment grade audit no matter what. So the customer is going to have to determine if they have a budget to pay out of pocket the IGA cost in the event that they don't enter into a performance contract. So that's an important thing for customers to understand. So here the milestones include issuing an investment grade audit contract with an ESCO. The ESCO that you have determined through the RFQ and RFP process delivers the best value to you. Best value meaning the best design, best expertise, best qualifications at a cost and project design that makes the most sense for you. The investment grade audit will establish a baseline energy use for the facility and will identify different energy savings opportunities. Then you do the actual performance contract agreement with the ESCO. This is the contract for services with a final scope of work. You're also going to enter into a financing agreement with a lender that covers the terms of the financial obligation between the customer and the lender. Some resources that we have or are pending at PennSave.org include sample IGA agreements and scoring criteria, educational materials on financing options, guidance on contracting agreement process, and also third-party facilitator resources and funding. We'll talk about third-party facilitators a little later in this presentation. Step 4 is the construction of the project. The goal here is the project construction is completed in a coordinated manner while minimizing any financial risks to the parties. Some specific milestones include that the performance contract is going to have specific contract milestones and scope of work, and that those milestones are achieved. The customer should be able to appoint a construction project liaison to work with the ESCO throughout the construction phase. And we have a kind of 201 document that talks about some construction guidance. Now, step 5 is verification of project performance. So this is after the project construction is complete. The goal here is to ensure that projects are saving energy as planned by employing some cost-effective verification measures. So, there's going to be some calibration that's needed after the project is constructed. So, best case scenario, the measurement and verification is just dealing with calibration issues. Sometimes other issues arise, and that's why measurement and verification is very important. So rather than specific milestones, the customer needs to understand the different measurement and verification options and associated costs. So you can have very stringent measurement and verification protocols and options, but they will have higher costs. So you want to be able to balance where you think your risks are as far as performance and where you want to spend your money on the most risky aspects of the project. And then on other aspects, maybe you want to lower your costs a little bit. So you want to make sure that you select the best measurement and verification service for the project budget and understand how the project is performing over time. Now, the ESCO can help you walk through some of your options. If you have a third-party facilitator, that's another way to make sure you really understand measurement and verification, the importance, and how you want to structure your options to fit your best costs. And we have some guidance, some 201 guidance on measurement and verification, and a 201 document that talks about your measurement and verification options. So at this point, I just want to pause for questions. The next thing that we'll go through is a little bit about financing and some typical performance contract challenges.
Christine, at this time we have no
Evan,
questions.
are there any questions?
Yeah, at this time we don't have any questions, but I encourage people again to use the panel. One comment, it just says, nope, I'm good. But yeah, use the panel to answer ask your questions, and I guess we'll check back again a little later. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Evan. I appreciate it. All right, so the next slide is basic ways to finance a project. Now, it's my understanding that typically what is happening in the market now is most projects are being financed through tax-exempt lease, which is really using your operating expenditures to finance a project through utility service budgets. Basically, this is the difference between having a line item on a budget that says, performance contract payback, or having a line item on a budget that says, utility operation expenses. And what these lease payments allow is that a portion of your annual utility spend is going to be dedicated to paying back your debt repayment to your third-party lender through this tax-exempt lease. And this is specifically structured for tax-exempt entities like municipalities and school districts. So this often ends up to be a very attractive way to finance projects. There's other ways to finance projects like general obligation debt financing. This is kind of traditional debt financing where a municipality or school district issues a bond or takes out a bank loan, and then goes through their repayment in a slightly different way. still has a guarantee from the energy service company, but this is just how you're going to deal with financing. And then external funds can always be used to make financing more attractive. For example, if you have utility rebates such as in Pennsylvania through Act 129, maybe you have access to subsidized bonds like the Qualified Energy Conservation Bonds, or you're going to be performing grid services like demand response activities, or bidding your energy efficiency capacity into the PJM interconnection market, which the ESCOs can all facilitate those activities. These are all ways to make the financing more attractive. So those are some of the things you want to think about when you're thinking about who your lender is going to be and how you're going to structure your agreement. But there are also important aspects to financing that you need to understand as a customer up front. So you really need to understand yourself in order to understand your options. So you want to know what your credit worthiness is and what your funding limitations are early on in the process. Before you issue a request for qualification for services to the ESCOs, you want to understand if there's going to be any potential roadblocks to financing, and you're going to have to probably disclose that at some point so that the ESCO and the lending agent can understand what your options are. When you're looking for a financing agent, you want to look for an agent that has experience with these type of projects, with energy projects, an agent that has adequate capital resources, has done business in Pennsylvania and knows the different laws and statutes, has a track record of successful performance, and has the adequate staff to meet your needs. And all of those things you can achieve by having a good RFQ for financing. And also ESCOs can't provide you with financial guidance, but they can give you recommendations on who they've done business with, and they can help steer you in the right direction, give you several different options. But you also want to utilize your own relationships with funders that you may have to make sure, again, you understand all of your options. I just want to focus a second on the energy guarantee. We spoke about this earlier, but wanted to again highlight what it is and its importance. So the energy guarantee is such a key part of performance contracting. The ESCO provides a guarantee to the customer that the project is going to generate enough energy savings to cover the cost of servicing the customer's debt. This gives the customer the security of knowing they're going to be able to recoup their investment. It reduces the customer's risk, it reduces the financing agent's risk, and it also creates an incentive for the ESCO to develop a good project that performs over time. Again, though, the energy guarantee is not magic, and it's not a license for the customer to ignore the way it manages their facility. The fine print in these contracts are very important. The final contract agreement between the ESCO and the customer is going to identify the terms of that guarantee and the different stipulations about how the facility energy management needs to be run in order to achieve energy savings and keep the guarantee. If the customer fails to fulfill its contractual obligations or deviates from the use patterns in the contract, the ESCO has the right to void that guarantee. So if the customer says, okay, well, I'm going to run my my boiler 10 hours a day, and that's what's in the contract, and the customer then, for a 6-month period decides it's going to run the boiler for 20 hours a day, well, that's not part of the contractual terms, and that wouldn't necessarily be fair for a business to have to guarantee energy savings if energy use is going to basically double. So this is very important for the customer to understand. And again, all parties must perform in these contracts. So this leads us right into some of the typical challenges in a performance contract. The customer fails to perform its contractual obligations, the energy guarantee can be voided. And I think this is a really, this portion of performance contracting is not completely understood by customers. And a lot of the feedback that we've got is that, performance contracting, we had an issue because the ESCO didn't give us our guarantee. And then when you dive down a little bit more, it turns out that the customer changed use patterns or didn't follow the contract and really didn't realize that the guarantee was contingent upon some of those contractual terms. So this is really important to understand. These can be great projects, but you have to understand, you know, the limitations. Also, a customer may not understand the technical assumptions that impact project economics. For example, the ESCO may make some assumptions about how energy prices are going to increase in the future or decrease in the future, and what the potential energy savings opportunities may be as a result. Determining what the right numbers are and determining what realistic numbers are really important to developing a contract. So, and we'll talk about a little bit about how to help the customers navigate that. Now, the ESCO and the customer have different roles and responsibilities, and we have a document that's just kind of going over customer roles and responsibilities through each of the 5 steps in the performance contract, and that's available on PennSave.org. But some samples of customer roles and responsibilities is that, you know, the customer has to be able to clearly communicate to the ESCO their project priorities and goals and any special needs. Say they need a new roof, or they need, you know, new electrical wiring and whatnot. That's the customer's responsibility. The customer also has the responsibility to develop this decision-making team that has the authority and the skills to review and approve these contracts. The ESCO has the responsibility to educate the customer about, you know, what sensible project design is and limitations. The customer may say, well, I want X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and the ESCO needs to let them know whether that's realistic or not. And you can't make over promises. When you're developing, in developing a final RFP, the ESCO is responsible for you know, developing a proposal that meets the needs of the customer within the cost ranges of estimates that are identified in the IGA. So, at basically the RFP, you're going to get some estimated cost of the project. The RFP comes first, and then the IGA. At the IGA, this is when the you know, the ESCO comes in and does a very, very detailed analysis of your facility. And the costs may change a little bit from what they estimated at RFP to then what they actually determine when they're on the ground doing a very detailed study of your facility. But the costs in the between the RFP and the IGA need to be within a certain range, so it's not kind of a bait and switch to the customer, and that's a responsibility of the ESCO. Now, you know, going over all of this, it's very, you know, should be very educational to the customer, but it also, customers may be feeling intimidated because it's a lot of things to balance and a lot of background information that you may need. That's why, you know, through this PennSave initiative, we're really in favor of having third-party independent facilitators to help customers, because we believe that a third-party independent facilitator can help, you know, relieve any anxiety that the customer may have. It can make this process go smoother for the customer and the ESCO, and we think that by providing education and relieving concerns, that we really think we can open up a lot of this market so that, both the customer and the ESCO can benefit. So facilitators can provide administrative assistance to help manage the contracting process. They can also provide technical assistance to inform the customer, review, you know, key project assumptions like baselines and forecasts about energy use. They can help through the M&B process, etc., and they can do a combination of both. So you really, when you're looking at a facilitator, you have to understand what are your needs. Do you have enough administrative staff that understands this process? Do you have the technical staff that understands this process? What are your needs? Maybe you need one, not the other. Maybe you need both. Also, the cost of that third-party facilitator can be incorporated into the performance contract, but just like the IGA, the cost can only be incorporated into the final contract if that final contract is signed. If you hire a facilitator and the final contract doesn't get signed, you're still going to have to pay that facilitator. So there is some risk here for the customer that you know, the cost of the facilitator may have to come out of pocket and can't be financed through the performance contract agreement. So you just want to understand that. In PennSave Online, we do have resources to help identify qualified facilitators and give you some guidance on fee structure options and more. So at this point, before we move into the last part of the presentation, which is really helping to determine if performance contracting is right for you with a kind of a 6-step yes or no kind of question and answer. Just want to pause now for any questions.
Yeah, Christine.
And don't feel shy.
We have one question.
Great.
If a client does not fully perform, would the guarantee be completely voided, or simply the value of the guarantee would be modified? So I guess this is a question asking if, so your example about running the boiler, does it void the entire contract, or is there some sort of re-terming of the guaranteed savings, or is it just completely voided on the customer side?
Sure. So again, I'll have Marilyn pipe in if I get this wrong, but my understanding is that it would not void the entire guarantee. It may void a portion of the guarantee. So if you ran that boiler for 20 hours over a 6-month period, your guarantee for that 6-month period may be affected, but your guarantee for the entire project would not be impacted. However, it would be incumbent upon the consumer, if they wanted that guarantee, that they return to the operation specifications in the contract in order to get back to a point where they are fulfilling their contractual terms.
Christina, I would suggest that in this context, if the customer, say for 1 month, did not achieve their savings, they're going to go to the ESCO. The ESCO is going to come in and they're going to want to know right away why that savings was not achieved. And if they find that it was the customer who ran things off of contract or used energy because of the use of the building differently than the project was designed for, then the customer still certainly has to pay their debt back, but and if they should change their operation, maintenance, or whatever it is that's causing the savings not to be achieved. On the other hand, if the savings are not achieved and the ESCO comes in and finds that it's their responsibility, whereas a piece of equipment wasn't running efficiently and the customer did everything they were supposed to do, then for that time the ESCO needs to write a check for the difference in savings. So if they said for this month I did not achieve my savings and the difference is, say, like $10,000 on the payment or however your payments are, the ESCO would have to write a check for the difference if it was their responsibility. So your statements on everybody has to perform are very important because everyone will negotiate and check when the savings are not achieved. Either the customer has to change their operations or the ESCO will write a check for the difference in savings, but I have seen the ESCOs come in right away if it's their responsibility and make sure that those things start running efficiently right away. So, I mean, that's the difference between the two.
Well,
but it is not the entire contract. It is only for that time when savings aren't achieved.
Great. Marilyn, thank you very much for giving that additional level of detail and information. Before we enter into the last section of the webinar, I just wanted to show people the PennSave.org website. We have a little bit about what PennSave is, our goals, project partners, and some of the ESCOs that have been supporting this initiative. We have a little bit of information talking about our process, this 3-step curriculum. and some of the facilitator information. We have some educational materials that you'll be able to download. Some of these are draft and some of them are finalized, so you can have access to this information. The procurement documents, again, we are still working on. Some of these are just in draft form now, but you'll have to see the Good Candidate 101, 201, and 301 information. We do give some information about events and resources. And here our Opportunity Center is where we would be listing RFPs and RFQs for customers and for ESCOs to learn about. We encourage you to join, if you're a customer, to join our mailing list under the customer bar, and service providers to join our service provider mailing list. This way we can facilitate information between customers and service providers. And if you have particular questions and want to send any information to us, send any information about, any issues you may be having or a need for more information, you can always email us at info@pennsave.org, and if we can't answer the question, we'll make sure that we find folks who can. So with that, I'm just going to go into the next section of the webinar, which is basically 6 key questions. And I know these slides are pretty ugly. I have to, excuse me, I have to change these a little bit so they're not so intimidating looking. But these are just some yes or no questions to help determine if performance contracting may be the right fit for you. So part A, which is just 2 yes or no questions. Some background is, in order to develop a viable performance contract, you must have the potential for energy savings at your facility. For example, old energy use equipment or inefficient operations. Maybe you have some deferred maintenance, or you have some kind of compelling non-energy or capital need like old electrical wiring or failing infrastructure. So that's the background. The 2 key questions are, does your facility have old energy using equipment, issues associated with deferred maintenance, and or a compelling capital need? So the answer here, and you just want to, write yourself a little note, yes or no. And by the way, all of this information is included in our Good Candidate 101 form that's available on the PennSave.org website. The second question is, does your total annual utility budget, so your utility spend for the whole year, is it over $450,000? $450,000 is the typical annual utility budget for a traditional performance contract. Smaller projects can also be financed with utility spends of $250,000. And if you answer no to the $450,000 utility spend, if you have over $250,000, you can still say yes. You just have to understand that this is not a traditional performance contract. This is a smaller performance contract, and you just want to make sure you're aware of that. So then now part B, the background here is, from start to finish, a performance contracting process can be lengthy. To facilitate the process, decision makers need to be educated on performance contracting and have a decision-making structure established. So question number 1 here would be, do decision makers at your facility understand performance contracting? If the answer here is no, just be aware that it doesn't necessarily take you out of the running for performance contracting. You just have to know where your potential liability or risk is, and you have to understand that if you're going to embark on something like this, you're going to have to do a good amount of internal education to make sure decision makers are on board. The second is, does your facility have a structure in place for decision making? In other words, if you need to have different, do you need legal counsel? Do you need your supervisors? You need a facility manager? Do you have a structure that can, get all those people in the same room to make decisions? So these are 4 questions on this slide, and you should be able to answer yes or no to these 4 questions. The second page here is 2 more questions. The background, part C here, is energy savings performance contract projects require the facility to identify a point person or champion to facilitate the contracting process. For example, serve as the point person for collecting data, lead facility tours, help basically bring this process from start to finish. does your facility, yes or no, have a point person available? This, again, another very important question. You can always have a third-party facilitator, but the third-party facilitator is always going to have a point person that they can go to. So this point person, you know, if you don't have a facilitator, may have a much larger role in this process. If you do have a facilitator, the role of your point person, you know, maybe a little less time-intensive or technically less intensive, but you're still going to need a point person no matter what. Part D, performance contracts require ownership of the facility and facility use to remain the same for the foreseeable future. This is again getting into the issue of, you know, you enter into a 10-year contract, but, you know, 5 years later, your facility that is teaching, you know, 300 school kids is changed, and now you're teaching, you know, 600 kids, for example. Some of that, and that changes your energy use patterns. Some of that, you know, you don't know, you don't have a crystal ball, but given the information you have now, to the best of your knowledge, is your facility's ownership and use expected to remain the same? Another key question. So those are 6 yes or no questions. If you answered yes to 4 or more of these questions, performance contracting might be a good choice for you. And we would recommend you attend one of our in-person 201 workshops, which we're going to be scheduling for probably the first quarter of 2014. We'd encourage you to sign up on our customer list that I showed you at the PennSave.org website to be notified about our 201 workshop. And we'd also encourage everybody to you know, tell anybody you think might be interested in learning more about PennSave and some of our resources, you know, just to spread the word, and make sure these educational materials are used by customers. If you answered yes to less than 4 of these questions, performance contracting might not be a good fit for you. However, we encourage you, if you answered yes to less than those 4 questions, we encourage you to share some of your results with us at info@pennsave.org so we can help discuss your options. You know, for example, you may not have a decision-making structure, your decision makers may not be educated on performance contracting. Some of those things, you know, those are key questions that we can massage through education and more information. Some other, you know, if your issues were related to, well, you know, the use of my facility is going to change in 5 years, well, that you may not be able to get over. So we hope that this was useful to customers. We are going to have this webinar is going to be recorded, and it's going to be available for download at PennSave.org. Again, you can contact us at info@PennSave with any questions. And I believe we are having another webinar, this 101 presentation we're giving again December 6th, I believe. So we'll be sending out more information about that, and we encourage you to pass along to people that might be interested. At this point, is there any questions? We have about 5 more minutes for questions.
Christina, we do have another question, and I think that this attendee is making a point, but maybe this is a good question. The question deals with whether your facilities are, or point whether your facilities is your utility cost is aggregated. So minimum budget spend is not per building, but rather an aggregate of all the buildings that might be included in a project. For example, buildings with 125K utility bills each. If you have 4 of those, then you would meet the minimum requirement.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
There's another, I would like to add something to that quickly. Annual utility spend is, and here's something you can figure with your annual utility spend. Basically, an ESPC will save you 20% of your annual utility spend. If you have and I'm going to put a low number on this, if you have $100,000 a year annual utility spend and you can save 20% a year, you're saving $20,000. And if you multiply that by the number of years that you contract for, maybe you just have a few ECMs that need to be done, maybe 5 years, it may be 6 years that you contract for. That's a good-sized project. You can come in with a project under $1 million, and there are a lot of companies out there that will do these projects. So the average utility spend that are mentioned here is a good guideline. But if you have any questions because you have a lower utility spend, just contact us at info@PennSave.org, and we can help explain it further. Most of your facilities, a lot of your facilities have more than one building. So yes, that is a combined annual utility spend.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Marilyn. We'd also encourage folks, if there are materials that you're looking for that we have not completed yet, also contact us at info@PennSave, and if we have demand for specific materials that are still in the drafting process, we will try to prioritize materials for completion based on customer input. So don't be shy in reaching out to us. We really need your input. Evan, is there any more questions?
I have no other questions in the pane right now. So
wonderful. Well, with that, we're just reaching the 1 hour mark. So would like to thank everybody for participating. We had really good turnout today, and we hope this was helpful. Again, visit PennSave.org and contact us at info@PennSave.org with any questions. And on behalf of PennFuture, the Pennsylvania chapter of the Energy Services Coalition, and the Pennsylvania Energy Partnership, we'd like to thank you for participating.